I need you to meet the most dangerous man in British military history. They say cats have 9 lives. This man had 90. Shot 11 times, survived 2 plane crashes, took a bullet straight through his brain. At 61 years old, he swam to shore from a crashed bomber while carrying his wounded friend. His name? Sir Adrian Carton de Wiart. And his story is so insane, you'll think I'm making it up. Imagine a man who looked at the horrors of war and said, without a hint of irony, frankly, I had enjoyed the war. Not because he was a monster, but because he was built different. This is the story of Sir Adrian Carton de Wiart, the soldier who simply refused to die. A man who was shot in the face, head, stomach, ankle, leg, hip, and ear. A man who lost an eye, lost a hand, survived 2 plane crashes, tunneled out of a POW camp. And when doctors refused to amputate his mangled fingers, he simply bit them off himself. And somehow, through it all, he kept smiling. Our story begins in Brussels, 1880. Adrian Paul Ghislain Carton de Wiart was born into Belgian aristocracy, the son of a wealthy lawyer. He had every advantage life could offer: private education, Oxford University, a future in law, or diplomacy. But young Adrian was restless. He was drawn to something raw, something primal. And in 1899, when the Second Boer War erupted in South Africa, he found his calling. Here's where it gets interesting. Adrian was only 19 years old, Belgian by birth, and had no business fighting for the British Army. But did that stop him? Absolutely not. He falsified his name, lied about his age, and enlisted as a trooper in the Middlesex Yeomanry. When he later wrote about this moment in his autobiography Happy Odyssey, he put it simply, "At that moment, I knew, once and for all, that war was in my blood. If the British didn't fancy me, I would offer myself to the Boers." Think about that level of commitment. He didn't care which side he fought for, he just needed to be in the fight. But war, as it turned out, had a surprise waiting for him. During a river crossing in full view of Boer commandos, young Adrian was shot twice, once in the stomach, once in the groin. The pain must have been excruciating. But when his superior asked if there were many Boers about, Adrian coolly replied, "No, but the few were very good shots." That's the kind of man we're dealing with here. Someone who takes 2 bullets and responds with dry wit. His cover blown, Adrian was sent back to England to recover and face his father, who was understandably furious about his son abandoning Oxford for a war zone. But here's the twist of foreseeing his son's determination. His father relented. Adrian returned to South Africa in 1901, this time with a commission as a 2nd lieutenant. He even traveled first class and tipped the bar staff so generously that he arrived in Cape Town with exactly £1 in his pocket. This man knew how to make an entrance. The Boer War ended, but Adrian's military career was just beginning. He served in India, then found himself in Somaliland in 1914, fighting against the Mad Mueller. It was here that he truly began his collection of injuries. During one engagement, he was shot twice in the face. One bullet took his left eye. Another tore off part of his left ear. Lord Hastings Ismay, who would later become NATO's first Secretary General, was there and recalled. He didn't check his stride, but I think the bullet stung him up as his language was awful. Adrian was fitted with a glass eye, but it irritated him so much that he threw it away and adopted the black eye patch that would become his trademark look. Picture this: a one-eyed aristocratic soldier with an eye patch, charging into battle. If this were a movie, you'd say it was over the top. This was real. Then came the First World War, and Adrian's legend truly took flight. In April 1915, during the Second Battle of Ypres, German artillery shredded his left hand. Shrapnel and fragments from his own wristwatch mangled his fingers, leaving 2 of them dangling by threads of flesh. The field doctor hesitated to amputate. So what did Adrian do? He ripped the fingers off himself. Let that sink in. The pain must have been beyond comprehension. But Adrian wasn't done. He eventually lost the entire hand, but he was back in action within months. Now, most men would have taken this as a sign to step back, to find a desk job, to retire with honor. Ow! But Adrian Carton de Wiart wasn't most men. He returned to the Western Front with an empty sleeve and an eye patch, commanding troops with a ferocity that inspired everyone around him. The moment that cemented his place in history came during the Battle of the Somme. In July 1916, The Germans had just killed 3 Allied commanders near Le Boiselle. The attack was faltering. The men were leaderless. Adrian stepped up and took command of all 3 units simultaneously. With no radios, no telephones, not even carrier pigeons to communicate, he became his own messenger. Running back and forth across no man's land under withering German fire, relaying orders between units, pulling grenade pins with his teeth and hurling them with his one good arm. His men watched in awe as this one-eyed, one-handed madman inspired them to hold the line against impossible odds. For this, he received the Victoria Cross, the highest decoration for valor in the British military. The citation read, "For most conspicuous bravery, coolness, and determination during severe operations of prolonged nature." But here's the thing that makes Adrian so fascinating. He barely mentions the Victoria Cross in his autobiography. To him, it was just another day at the office. And the injuries kept coming. During a night mission at Delville Wood, nicknamed the Devil's Wood, he was shot clean through the back of the skull. The bullet passed straight through his head. Any normal person would be dead. Adrian was back on his feet in weeks. By the end of the war, he had been wounded 8 times on the Western Front alone, in addition to his earlier injuries. The hospital that treated him kept a special pair of pajamas waiting for him because he was such a frequent visitor. But here's what makes Adrian truly unique. While other soldiers wrote about the trauma and horror of war, Adrian wrote about how much he loved it. "Frankly, I had enjoyed the war," he said. "It had given me many bad moments, lots of good ones, plenty of excitement. This wasn't the rambling of a psychopath. This was a man who had found his purpose, who thrived in chaos, who looked death in the face so many times that they became old friends. The years between the wars should have been peaceful. For Adrian, they were anything but. He served as a military advisor to Poland during their wars against Soviet Russia, Czechoslovakia, Ukraine, and Lithuania. In 1919 alone, he survived 2 plane crashes. The second one resulted in a brief period of captivity with the Lithuanians. After his release, he organized gun smuggling operations via Hungary to support the Polish military. When Cossack cavalry attacked his observation train, he fought them off single-handedly with his revolver, fell off the moving train, leaped back on, and continued firing until they escaped. All while being one-handed and one-eyed. He fell in love with Poland and stayed there for 18 years, hunting wildlife and living the life of a country gentleman. In 1923, he retired with the rank of Major General. He was 43 years old. He should have lived out his days in peace. But history had other plans. September 1st, 1939. Germany invades Poland from the west. The Soviet Union invades from the east. At 59 years old, one-eyed, one-handed Adrian Carton de Wiart abandoned his estate, acquired a fake passport, and escaped to Romania. When he returned to Britain, they recalled him to active service, because of course they did. Who wouldn't want a man like this on their side? In April 1940, now aged 60, Adrian was given the rank of acting lieutenant general and tasked with leading an Anglo-French landing force in Norway. The operation was a disaster from the start. His seaplane was attacked by German fighters and crash-landed on a fjord. Rather than panic, Adrian calmly waited in the wreckage until the enemy plane ran out of ammunition and left. Only then did he proceed to shore. His forces were undersupplied, outgunned, and about to be encircled. But Adrian didn't care about odds. He led his men over mountains, under constant artillery and Luftwaffe attack, until the Royal Navy could evacuate them. He landed back in Britain on his 60th birthday. Most men his age are planning retirement. Adrian was planning his next mission. In 1941, Winston Churchill personally appointed him to lead a secret mission to Yugoslavia to make contact with Tito's partisans. But fate had one more crash in store. After refueling in Malta, his Wellington bomber went into a nosedive and crashed into the Mediterranean Sea. Adrian, 61 years old, one-handed, one-eyed, swam to shore while carrying an injured comrade. They reached the coast of Libyaxis territory and were immediately captured by the Italians. What followed was 2.5 years as a prisoner of war. But Adrian didn't spend that time knitting. He immediately began planning escapes. He tunneled out of the POW camp, evaded capture for 8 days disguised as an Italian peasant despite being wounded. Elderly and speaking no Italian and, was eventually recaptured. He made multiple escape attempts, each more audacious than the last. In 1943, the Italians released him to negotiate their surrender terms. Churchill then appointed him as his personal representative to Chiang Kai-shek in China. This one-eyed, one-handed, 63-year-old soldier, who had survived more injuries than most armies combined, now found himself navigating the complex politics of wartime China. He attended the Cairo Conference in 1943, standing in photographs alongside Roosevelt, Churchill, and Chiang Kai-shek. From the trenches of the Somme to the highest levels of Allied diplomacy, Adrian had done it all. He served in China until 1947, when he finally retired with the honorary rank of lieutenant general. He was 67 years old. He had served in 3 major conflicts across 4 decades. He had been wounded 11 times. He had lost an eye and a hand, had survived 2 plane crashes, a shipwreck, and a bullet through the brain. And through it all, he maintained his sense of humor, his love of life, and his unshakable courage. But the warrior wasn't finished yet. On his way home from China, he stopped in Rangoon as a guest of the army commander. Coming downstairs, he slipped on coconut matting, fell, broke several vertebrae, and knocked himself unconscious. Even at 66, with a broken back, he refused to die. Doctors treated him and found large amounts of shrapnel still embedded in his old wounds. The unkillable soldier had survived yet again. In 1949, his wife of 41 years passed away. Most men would crumble. Adrian, at 71, married again a woman 23 years his junior, named Joan Sutherland. They settled at Agena House in County Cork, Ireland. He spent his remaining years fishing, hunting, and living the quiet life he had earned 1,000 times over. But here's the beautiful part: Adrian Carton de Wiart died as he lived.
Oh.
Not in a hospital bed, not with tubes and machines, but peacefully at his home on June 5, 1963, at the age of 83. He left no papers, no grand statements, no final words of wisdom. Just the legacy of a man who refused to break. He is buried not inside the graveyard wall, but just outside it, to the grounds of his home, Agena House. Even in death, he remained unconventional. A warrior to the end, resting not among the peaceful dead, but on the edge, looking out, as if ready to rise again should duty call. Evelyn Waugh based his fictional Brigadier Richie Hook in Sword of Honor on Adrian. And even that character couldn't capture the full measure of the man. The Swedish heavy metal band Sabaton immortalized him in their song The Unkillable Soldier, ensuring that new generations would know his name. So what do we make of a man like this? A man who bit off his own fingers because a doctor hesitated? A man who ran through machine gun fire with one arm? A man who said he enjoyed war while millions died around him? Perhaps the answer lies in his own words. He called his autobiography Happy Odyssey. Not Tragic Odyssey or Terrible Odyssey. Happy, because for Adrian Carton de Wiart, every wound was a story. Every brush with death was an adventure, and every day above ground was a gift. In a world that often feels soft and comfortable, there's something almost mythical about a man who refused to break, who looked at the worst humanity had to offer and said, "Is that all you've got?" He wasn't a superhero. He was something far more interesting, a man who chose every single day to keep fighting. And in the end, that's the most incredible thing about Sir Adrian Carton de Wiart. Not that he survived, but that he never stopped living. He was the unkillable soldier, the man who enjoyed the war. And perhaps in some strange way, he was teaching us all a lesson, that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the refusal to let fear win. That a man can lose an eye, lose a hand, take bullets through his skull, and still stand tall. That the human spirit, when forged in fire, becomes something unbreakable. Rest in peace, Sir Adrian. The war is over. You won.